I wanted to get into on the show thoughts on Alabama and Clemson because there was a lot of conversation. I saw a lot on social media about everyone kind of being thrilled, if you will, that there's going to be, hey, new blood. These they're done. Well, I don't think either of these teams are absolutely done as it relates to the playoff picture, although the path is increasingly, very difficult. But I did want to just talk about these two teams and what those losses last week actually meant for the sport. So Clemson loses to Notre Dame, Alabama loses to LSU. It's Alabama's second loss, and Clemson, with now a poor resume getting worse, loses that game against Notre Dame, who's not a great football team, and they beat them pretty handily in that ballgame. So first and foremost, you have to understand, they have dominated, these two teams, the college football landscape in the 8 years of the playoff era. So if you look at the 32 spots that have been available in the college football playoff era to playoff teams, they have almost all of them. 13 of 32 spots for just two teams. That's 41% of the playoff. They've occupied 10 of 16 championship game spots. That's 63%. They've won 5 of 8 national championships. That's 63%. I mean, either Bama or Clemson have been in the last 7 national title games. They have run the sport, and good for them. Good for them. I'm not sitting here cheering the fact that they're not involved. I am saying, though, it could be healthy for the sport that they might not be involved. That's how dominant they've been. No other team has more than 4 appearances in the playoff. Ohio State, Oklahoma share that 4. And then you've got to go down to Georgia and Notre Dame for the next 2 teams that are most appearances in the college football playoff with 2. So what does this mean? Well, what does it mean? What does it mean for this year? Well, it cleared up the path for TCU. TCU, I think you can argue, is now win and in to the college football playoff. So that's one. The undefeated Power 5 champ, TCU, would likely get into the playoff. The Pac-12, it cleans up their path now to the college football playoff. And I think a lot of people on the West Coast are excited about that because this is the conference that has been left behind in the college football playoff era. Only Oregon and Washington have made appearances. And now you've got this situation where you think to yourself, hey, there's a good chance that Oregon might go or USC might go or even UCLA with a chance to go to the playoff. The other team that it really kind of cleans up, Tennessee. Even in a week in which Tennessee loses, they sit there at 5 in the rankings, and there's a pretty clear path right now to that second SEC team being Tennessee that goes to the college football playoff. So Tennessee benefits from the loss of Alabama and Clemson. And then I think that overarching, you see those numbers and you think to yourself, hey, it's probably good that we have new blood. And I think that those numbers suggest that. Now, I want to also touch on what it means for those specific programs. So that's what it meant for the sport generally, and some teams that it's good for this year. But what does it mean for Clemson and Alabama moving forward in their program? Let's start with Alabama, because I've seen a lot of takes out there that hey, this is the end. The dynasty is over. Bama's done under Nick Saban. And I just totally disagree with that. Totally disagree with that. And all you have to do is look at what it took to give Bama their 2 losses this year. Okay, there is no team in America that has played a tougher road schedule than Alabama this year. They had to go to Texas, to Tennessee, and to LSU. Those 3 teams are some of the most talented teams in America, and in every one of those buildings, they're facing at least a minimum of 101,000. In fact, an average of 103,000. And based on what I've told you over the course of the last few weeks in all of these shows, winning on the road is incredibly difficult. And think about what it took to beat Alabama. This isn't even a great Alabama team. We all acknowledge that. They're not what they should be on defense. They don't have the speed on the outside at the wide receiver position. And yet it took a missed field goal from Bama against Tennessee, and then they come back down the field, speaking of the Volunteers, and Tennessee makes a field goal by a yard over the crossbar. They carry the goalposts out of Neyland Stadium. Then LSU, what does it take? It takes Brian Kelly going for 2 in the first overtime to beat Alabama. That's how good Bryce Young has been, even with a team that you wouldn't say is one of the better Alabama teams. They're recruiting at a high level. Nick Saban is not going to let them fall. So all this talk about Bama being done, I totally disagree with it. They had a bad schedule this year. They got beat in incredibly tough environments, and it took maximum effort, playmaking, and luck by both Tennessee and LSU to get those 2 wins. Now, Clemson's a different story. Why is Clemson a different story? Because it wasn't great teams and great environments that beat Clemson. It was Notre Dame. This is a Notre Dame team that's lost 3 games. They lost to Stanford and Marshall at home. Okay, so it's far different when Notre Dame beats you and they do it pretty handily rather than a made field goal and a 2-point conversion. It's a different story. Clemson has clearly fallen below what they were under Dabo Swinney when they had Trevor Lawrence and when they had, Etienne and Hunter Renfrow and Deshaun Watson. This is not the same team. Statistically, they're not even close. They don't run the ball nearly well enough to dominate the terms of a game. You can't go to Notre Dame, a 3-loss team, and lose, 35-14, like get dominated 28-0 at one point in that game, and think that you're still on the upper echelon in the top tier of college football. Clemson has clearly fallen below the bar of where we would put them as it relates to where they were in the playoff era in the last 8 years. Their last 3 losses, Notre Dame, Pitt, and NC State. Alabama's last 3 losses, LSU, Tennessee, and Georgia in the Natty. 2 very, very different trajectories right now, and Clemson's going to have to rally themselves and become better if they want to play to the point where they played in the last 8 years. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy that clip, make sure you click subscribe somewhere down here. From game highlights to exclusive interviews and rankings, we've got everything you need as a college football fan right here, College Football on Fox.